Welcome to Royal Daily Report, your #1 source for the latest royal news, breaking stories, and updates that matter. I'm your host, and tonight we have a story that has sent shockwaves straight through the heart of the global fashion world. Meghan Markle has been banned, and this time it's serious. According to sources speaking directly to Royal Daily Report, Dior will not dress Meghan Markle. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. And this was no accident. It was not a scheduling conflict. It was not a creative difference. It was a ban, a hard, clear, do not call us kind of ban. And the reason behind that quietly shut door goes all the way back through years of missing items, unreturned clothes, private warnings passed between stylists, and one single dress that refused to stay hidden. Yes, you heard that right here on Royal Daily Report. A dress reportedly went missing. But let us take you back to the very beginning of this story so you understand exactly how we got here. It all started with a soft green designer dress. Meghan wore this dress during a photo shoot for Variety magazine. This dress was borrowed, not given as a gift, not purchased. It was taken for a few hours only, which is completely normal when working on fashion shoots. But when that shoot ended and the team packed everything up, the dress did not go back to the fashion company. It did not show up with the other returned items. It simply vanished. No paperwork. No explanation, just gone. This story might have stayed buried and forgotten forever, until 3 years later, Meghan walked out in public wearing that exact same green dress. Fashion experts were immediately stunned. Designers recognized it straight away. The people who worked wardrobe that day suddenly remembered the bag that came back lighter than it should have been. That dress became living proof. Real evidence of a rumor that had quietly circulated for years, but was now suddenly, undeniably real. A small moment from years ago exploded into the spotlight, and the entire fashion industry was forced to look again at every uncomfortable story they had chosen to ignore. It was no longer just a dress. It was the beginning of something much bigger. Once that green dress appeared again in public, people who had stayed silent started connecting their own memories. The gowns that went missing after photo shoots. The items that were borrowed but never returned. The wardrobe assistants who noticed pieces disappearing from clothing racks. The stylists who quietly stopped offering their most valuable pieces for loan. The brand managers who stopped answering calls from her team. None of these incidents seemed large enough on their own. A missing necklace here. A pair of shoes that never came back. A dress that disappeared after an event. But when you put them all together, they painted a picture that nobody wanted to see. Designers became nervous. Assistants started warning each other quietly. Some clothing brands began making small private notes in internal records. Do not loan, risk of losing items. It became very clear to many people inside the industry that the green dress was not the beginning of the story at all. It was simply the moment everything finally made sense. A pattern they had all tried to overlook was now standing directly in front of them, impossible to deny. And as the fashion world began piecing together the past, that trail did not lead to Paris or London or Los Angeles. It led somewhere much earlier, somewhere far from royal palaces and luxury fashion shows. It led straight back to Toronto. Before the palace gates, before the news headlines and the documentaries, before the million-dollar wardrobe budgets, there was a simple commercial photo shoot in Toronto. No red carpets, no worldwide cameras, just a basic set for Reitmans, a clothing brand Meghan worked with early in her career. People who were there that day still clearly remember how she walked in. Confident, friendly, charming, exactly the kind of person who lights up a room without even trying. The shoot itself ran smoothly. Cameras flashed. Outfits were swapped. Assistants moved quickly between clothing racks. It was the kind of busy, ordinary day that fashion teams rarely remember, because nothing dramatic usually happens. But something did happen that day. Not loudly, not right away. Only when the shoot finished and the team began checking items back in did things start to feel wrong. A few dresses were not where they were supposed to be. A group of clothing pieces seemed to be missing. And one very specific pair, Aquazzura. Very Matilda heels, the exact pair Meghan had worn during the shoot, were nowhere to be found. At first, nobody assumed the worst. Mistakes happen all the time on busy sets. Assistants pack too quickly. Items get mixed up with personal bags. Wardrobe pieces accidentally leave with the wrong person. It happens, so the team let it go. Until months later, the entire world watched as Meghan Markle appeared for her royal engagement announcement, smiling, glowing, stepping into the biggest chapter of her life. But fashion insiders noticed something else. On her feet were those same aquazzurra heels, the missing ones. When the question was raised quietly behind the scenes, Meghan reportedly offered a simple explanation. She said she did not want items she had worn to end up for sale online. She said she was too famous for that. Some people accepted that explanation, others did not. But inside the fashion world, that moment became a private warning, a message passed quietly from stylist to stylist. Be careful, things go missing. This was the very first crack in the timeline. No palaces, no cameras rolling, just a small and quiet pattern beginning to take shape. Years later, Meghan stepped into an entirely different world, Kensington Palace. A world built on rules so old and so firm that breaking even one of them can shake entire institutions. And one of those rules, carved deeply into royal tradition, is straightforward. Nothing is free. Not clothes, not shoes, not jewelry, not even a pair of earrings handed to you backstage at an event. Every item must be purchased, written down, officially recorded, and properly documented. The reason is simple and serious. Accepting gifts from designers could look like favoritism or even bribery. Members of the royal family must remain completely neutral. Their clothing cannot become a deal-making tool for brands hoping to gain publicity by association. But according to palace staff and sources familiar with what happened inside those walls, Meghan arrived carrying a very different mindset. A Hollywood mindset. In Hollywood, wearing a designer's clothing is itself the favor. Being seen in a gown is considered payment enough. Brands compete heavily just for the chance to dress a major star. But that system simply does not exist inside the royal family. When assistants explained the rules clearly, they expected perhaps some surprise or confusion. Instead, they reportedly met with frustration. Meghan reportedly pushed back, saying exceptions had been made for her before and more could certainly be made again. The palace saw it very differently. To them, it was not personal at all. It was simply the rules. To her, according to insiders, those rules felt old, unnecessary, and limiting. And as the requests for gifted clothing continued to come in, palace staff began to grow genuinely concerned. It was not the money they worried about most. It was the direct clash between centuries of royal structure and the habits Meghan had carried with her from the entertainment world. Small disagreements quickly grew into a larger, more serious concern. This was no longer just confusion, it was a pattern. And here on Royal Daily Report, we are committed to giving you the full picture. When Meghan officially became a working royal, there was already a long and well-established system in place. Prince Charles, as the Prince of Wales at the time, covered the wardrobe costs for his sons' wives for their official royal duties. This was not about fashion. It was about representing the monarchy correctly and professionally during public-facing work. For years, the numbers stayed predictable and manageable. Princess Catherine, for example, spent around £100,000 for an entire year. And that covered state dinners, charity visits, international tours, and hundreds of public events. But when Meghan's wardrobe spending began, the palace finance team could not believe what they were seeing. The numbers climbed at a speed nobody expected. Hundreds of thousands of pounds spent, then approaching $1 million in a single year, and for fewer public events than Catherine had attended. Designers began reaching out asking when certain items would be returned. Bills piled up for pieces worn once and then never seen again in the records. Items disappeared from official logs without any explanation. Finally, Prince Charles stepped in, not to scold, but to have a calm conversation about expectations, about spending limits, and about the structure that every royal woman before Meghan had followed without question. But sources say Meghan did not receive that conversation the way it was intended. She reportedly felt singled out. She felt judged. She felt controlled. And that moment became a real turning point, the widening of a gap between Meghan and the institution she had married into. What began as a wardrobe issue had become a deeply personal one. A misunderstanding had become a genuine break. And while the palace struggled with these tensions behind closed doors, the fashion world outside was quietly making its own decisions. decisions that would eventually lead directly to Dior closing its doors to her completely. By this point in the story, viewers naturally ask the same question: why? Why would someone with a multi-million-dollar home, global fame, and major media deals risk their reputation over clothing? Why not simply purchase the pieces? Why leave with items that were never hers to keep? Sources who have watched this pattern closely say the answer is not about money at all. It is about mindset. Hollywood runs like a completely different world. When you are rising in that industry, wearing a designer's clothing is the deal itself. Designers chase the celebrities, not the other way around. If something is returned late, nobody complains. If something is kept accidentally, or even deliberately, it is often brushed aside as simply the cost of working with a major star. And according to insiders, Meghan carried that exact same mindset into every room she entered. The belief that wearing a piece was payment enough, that her image alone was the trade, that rules were flexible when enough fame was involved. But this mindset collided with everything around her, with royal rules, with designer expectations, with industry standards that had existed long before her arrival. It created serious problems where none needed to exist. It turned simple borrowing agreements into complicated and uncomfortable situations. It was never really about the dress. It was never really about the shoes. And it was never truly about Dior. It was about the belief that her presence alone changed the rules for everyone around her. Once people understood that clearly, they stopped trying to explain away the missing pieces individually. They saw the full pattern, not a series of accidents, but a consistent behavior that had followed her from Toronto to Hollywood to Kensington Palace. In the end, this story returns to exactly where it started. One single green gown, a dress that disappeared quietly, traveled through years of time, showed up unexpectedly on a public outing, and revealed a trail that had been quietly forming for a very long time. It was not the most expensive dress she ever wore. It was not connected to any royal event. It was not particularly dramatic on camera, but it became the symbol of something far greater. It became the moment the fashion world could no longer pretend that the whispers were just whispers. And when Dior made its quiet and final decision, the entire industry understood exactly what it meant. A door had been closed, not with anger, but with absolute finality. Because in luxury fashion, silence speaks far louder than any newspaper headline. A house like Dior does not walk away unless it firmly believes the story happening behind the scenes is far heavier than any glamour visible on the surface. Today, that green dress still sits at the center of this conversation like a clue in a mystery that simply refuses to fade. It connects the Toronto set to the palace hallways. It connects missing wardrobe samples to million-pound budgets. It connects Hollywood habits to royal walls that could not bend, no matter the pressure applied. It is the single thread that pulls the entire story together. And even now, inside fashion studios, private showrooms, and quiet industry offices around the world, people are still talking about that moment. The dress that came back, the stories that followed it, and the undeniable pattern that pushed one of the most respected fashion houses in the world to quietly walk away. Because in the fashion world, where every public appearance tells a story and every single piece of clothing carries its own history, there are dresses that are worn once and forgotten. And then there are dresses that leave echoes. And this story, Meghan's story, is far from finished. Not by a long shot. Where there is one missing gown, there may well be others. Where one designer steps back, more may follow. And where Dior closes a door, the entire industry watches very closely, wondering what story will come next. That is the full report for today, brought to you exclusively by Royal Daily Report, the channel that brings you the stories the rest of the world is still catching up on. If you are watching this and you are not yet subscribed to Royal Daily Report, hit that subscribe button right now, because stories like this one break here first. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next one. right here on Royal Daily Report.